This is Richard Hatton here with Bernadette Phillips from New Insights for Change to discuss some of the political, social and economic um, um, issues that are hitting us quite hard at the moment, Bernadette. And one of them indeed is the whole issue about Irish water, which is really causing consternation. People are in a very helpless, angry place with it. Where do you think it's going to end up, Bernadette?
Well, I suppose we have to take it back to basics of water being a human right. And I suppose the conversation has been, in the sense of billing people,
Yes.
has been that it's been made into a utility. And that's, I suppose, a major concern really, because something like water is an absolute requirement for life. So we can never convert it into being in utility form. And we need to be thinking of it in respect of that. And I mean, this isn't something sort of that is just something new, on the stage of life. Water is something that's indispensable. We have to have it. We can't live without it. And I suppose the tragedy is that the lack of humanity in relation to the delivery of this, around Irish water and water charges, has been that the lack of thought in relation to people's inability to pay.
Yes.
And I mean real inability to pay, because we have experienced such a range of austerity, particularly in the past 8 years, that so many people that I meet just have no more to give. So it isn't a question of that they can find something and they're able to, they just don't have it. And I suppose the other side of the important point as well is that we're already paying for water in Ireland. We pay it through our taxes. And, since, I think about 1997, when the whole issue of water has been a burning issue historically in Ireland, so it was deemed that instead of charging people domestically, that it would be taken through taxes, i.e. through proportion of motor taxation and that, which went to councils for the maintenance of water across the country.
So you're saying it's been paid for already?
And is being paid for as we speak, because those taxes haven't been changed. And so it's suddenly, I suppose, the burden of this being thrown upon people is one issue. But the very fact we're paying for it already is a very real issue. And I think, but taking it back to the human right of water. And we do have United Nations conventions on the right to water. And this has been thought through over many, many decades. And we're striving to ensure that everybody on the planet has water within a decade. And we suddenly find that people have this huge imposition, and I think this is where the anger comes from as well. There's a great sense about lack of consultation with people about this whole area of water charges, and that it is being imposed, not as a measure now, as we know, even to ensure that we don't use X amount, but now it's suddenly a charge. So it's really about money at the end of the day. An exchequer getting money, through this. And I think all of that has added to the disquiet and the anger about it. But also back to that very, very basic issue of people's inability to be able to pay it.
On that point, Bernadette, I mean, I've been in very, I would say, almost dire financial straits the last year or two due to just recurring surgeries and having to sort of cope with not being able to work and social services, etc., etc. And I remember reaching into my letterbox last year, and I had very little money at the time, and pulling out this water registration pack, and Bernadette, I was so angry. It was almost like I don't have the money to pay for this. And I'm facing moving into a hostel, how do I personally get past sort of the anger, turn it into something constructive? How do I deal with this?
Well, I mean, what a difficult position.
Yes.
You know, you and so many other people
Yes.
around the country having that experience of finding something coming through a letterbox, and just that whole, I suppose, fear that comes alongside it.
Yes.
With a basic that you must have, that you cannot live without.
Correct.
And that very, very moment when you hold that envelope in your hand and you think, what am I going to do here? There's a horrible sense of helplessness,
Yes.
isn't there?
Yes.
You know, I'm sure, you know, which is coming
Complete.
through very clearly from what you're saying here.
Complete.
And where do you go?
Yes.
And, you know, I suppose to add insult to injury, we suddenly, you know, hear the rumours of, well, we have ways of maybe getting this money from you. You know, i.e. the things that have been bandied around from welfare and all of that. And so the very sort of basic that people are living on is now also being threatened in relation to this. So they are huge. That's why it's such an emotive issue.
Yes.
Such an emotive issue for people. Because it's the real, I suppose, core basic that it's back to. And the fear that's generated out there, and the helplessness that's been generated by this as well. And with people's sort of knowledge that, you look at, you know, I mean, there isn't anywhere I can go with this. And we you know, my concern is that when will government start to listen to people's real feelings about this? You know, we've seen thousands and thousands of people, and on a very regular basis, demonstrate on the streets of Ireland and across Ireland.
There's
in
been a ferocious backlash.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in the villages and towns, you know, all across the country, over months and months and months and months. So that has to say something in a democracy.
Of course.
Because after all, a government is for the people, by the people. And the people of Ireland have demonstrated very, very clearly that this is something that they really have a major problem with and a major issue with. And it needs to be taken back for absolute discussion again, absolute consultation again.
I mean, it's being mishandled from the very, very beginning. It's been appalling. And,
Well, absolutely.
And I recently read, it was on the internet, that you know, if people are not going to pay, the government is now thinking of going into people's salaries.
Yes, yes. I mean, there are things that are being rumoured, you know,
Yes.
around, and
But is that
the
not
fear of welfare
a
and
kind of a desperate act on behalf of the government? I mean, it's you know, people obviously are not going to pay.
well, it is a desperate act, but also a desperate lack of listening,
Yes.
where ears have been completely closed
Yes.
in relation to the real situations that this is evoking in people.
Yes.
And the real experiences that are happening behind the scenes, because with the measure of austerity that has happened in Ireland, across Europe, and here in Ireland, because it's so close to us here, you know, that cut after cut after cut. And this one is really the straw
Yes.
that breaks it.
It is.
And so it's real when people say, I can't pay for this. This isn't something that people are just suddenly deciding to talk about. They actually can't,
Yes.
in many cases.
Yes.
And that has to be heard. That must be heard. It has to be listened to. And to take it back to the human right situation of water around the world, and what it actually means at the end of the day. And so they're the sorts of discussions that need to be had. And so we need to look another way of ensuring that our water is maintained, because of course we all know it needs to be maintained. We all know that we're losing more than 40% of our water through broken pipes across the country.
Right.
So we all know that's not sustainable.
Right.
And we know that something has to change about that.
Right.
But there is another way of doing this. And there always has been another way in relation to austerity. That to raise the taxes of the very wealthy is one immediate way to ensure that those that receive the most pay the most. And I mean, I think that's a pretty fair system.
And it's very much to the contrary, in fact. It's those who can't afford to pay, like myself, are paying.
Well, absolutely. Or you're going to pay the very same. The person that's on $1 million is going to pay the very same as somebody who's on a welfare of 188.
Which is criminal.
Absolutely. So when we put it in respect of that, we can see how unfair it actually is. So there are real issues that need to be addressed, and I really hope that the powers that be out there really begin to listen. And I suppose we're coming very close to another general election.
Yes, we are.
So the issues that arise within society at any given time are burning issues that are going to be on the door of every politician that knocks on them across the country.
Right.
And one of those burning issues is going to be water charges.
Of course.
So please, I would say to politicians, please start listening, and certainly into government parties, please start listening to people about this issue. It is a real, genuine concern.
And then, of course, act on what you're hearing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another consultation, a new way of approaching this. It can be done. It isn't impossible. It just requires working with rather than against people. And austerity measures have worked against people over the past 8 years. It is time to start working with people to build this great country and this great economy again. And to give people a sense of hope again. Because what these measures have done, they've taken the trust out of people. Trust in the political system. They have crushed people in that respect. And as we know, when trust goes, what do we have? Where do we turn? These are the people that are governing our country, and we need to be able to connect with them and trust them and believe what they tell us, and that they are working for the better and for the greater good.
Bernadette, we were just talking about trust and how people do not trust the government anymore. I mean, when you don't have trust, what exactly do you have?
Well, you have nothing, Richard, because you have no foundation on which to base anything. And we all need a firm foundation. We all need people, in positions of power that we know that we can go to, that we can rely on, that we can believe. And I mean, I think this is the issue as well, because, reading back on manifestos, political manifestos and party manifestos of the last election, for example, and government manifestos, the parties that are in government now, for example, it's like reading a work of fiction.
Yes.
It doesn't relate to what has been implemented in so many cases. It doesn't relate to what was promised. And of course, when things are broken, when promises are broken and not delivered, the first thing to go is trust. Because how can I, as a voter, believe what a party is telling me if they have broken so many of their promises in the past?
I mean, repeatedly, this seems to be a repetitive thing that's almost happening, decade by decade. It's parties coming in, parties coming out. It's maintaining the status quo,
yes,
really, of corruption. Nothing really seems to change in terms of delivery, to the people.
Well, yes, and I mean the sad tragedy of that is that people stop voting.
Which is something that's happening. Absolutely,
and has been happening for decades and decades. And there's whole sections of people that never register to vote, they don't engage with voting. And I was involved in a programme some years back called Your Vote, Your Voice, and going around the country actually talking to people about how important it is to vote and how essential that every vote is, because we know that seats in elections have been lost through decades, here in Ireland and right across the world, by perhaps even 1 or 2 votes. So I would say to everybody today, your vote is absolutely crucial. Please go out and vote. Exercise your right to vote. It has been long and hard fought for by people, who have gone before us. So it's an essential thing that we begin to engage again
even if we're voting in a regime that we think, is maybe not going to listen to us, that we don't trust, you think it's important to engage with the voting process anyway?
Absolutely, but I think, there's more than just the parties.
Right.
There are other people that are coming on stream as well. So I say to
Right.
people, have a look,
Right.
vote with your life, vote with your experience, vote with your conscience if you wish. But, have a look at what people are saying, because the tragedy is that people disengage and they don't listen to anybody that's presenting even a new argument. So if we're in there saying, hey, there's a new conscious way to do politics, people are not connecting with that either.
Okay.
So they completely have that disconnect.
Okay.
And they don't exercise their right to vote. And therefore, what happens? We get the same old again and again.
Yes, we do.
We get the same sort of core group of people that will always vote for the same party or the same people. And so we get the same policies because of that. And I would say to people that the policies that governments enact are not separate from your everyday life. They actually affect your everyday life, because they're the policies that you have to live in within your society. For example, when charges are imposed, they're a government policy, so they affect your life. So get out there, have a very clear view and an open mind in relation to what people are saying right across the board, in parties and across independents, and listen to the value system. Now this is about the new consciousness.
Yes.
The value system
Yes.
that they're saying at the core and the heart and the soul. And how well is that resonating with you?
So you're looking for really gems of truth.
Absolutely.
You will only recognise if you're consciously engaged with the voting process.
Absolutely. And so it's the stories that really resonate. It's the policies that people are talking about that really have listened to people. Because so much of the time it's rhetoric.
Yes.
So much of the time it's just, oh, this is what we say. But it's not coming from a heart place.
Yes.
And it certainly isn't coming from an experience place.
Yes.
So listen to the people that are coming in with the heart and the experience. And they want to create change. And they want to bring in a new conscious political system in Ireland and in Europe and across the world.
And I mean, in spite of my own considerable cynicism, Bernadette, they are there.
Absolutely.
They are there.
Yes, and something, we've got to believe that.
Yes.
And the more that we have these kinds of conversations, may it encourage people out there who are thinking of engaging with politics, who would like to go into politics but a little bit afraid, saying, hey, you know something, if you're coming from experience, don't be afraid. Don't feel undermined by a big political machine, because the people at the end of the day are the people that have the power, not the government. The policymakers have no more power than what the people give them. And when we begin to empower ourselves again, consciously, as people, everything changes.
And somehow that seems to be what you said. It's almost reflecting what's happening with the demonstrations around Irish sort of water.
Yes. Yes.
People
Yes.
are consciously deciding to group together and
Absolutely.
really voice their objections in a unified way.
Absolutely.
And that is having an effect.
Well, it is having an effect
that is
across
having an effect.
the energy for people.
Yes.
But the other side of it is when people constantly feel this counter attack that's coming across, and it's sort of, with this powerful machine,
Yes.
people can get, very disappointed and disillusioned and give up. I say to people, please don't give up. This is our moment. This is our moment of opportunity to really, really, really show the power you have as a people. And be strong and be together in this. And it's the same, when we look across the health cuts, the education cuts, the special needs cuts, the absolute situations that families have been placed into in Ireland over the last 8 years.
And individuals like myself.
Absolutely.
Who, through ill health just haven't been able to engage with work for, 3 years.
Yes.
I mean, it's horrendous, really.
Yes.
What a person has to go through. to get basic means.
Yes. Basic.
Basic,
Yeah.
and not to be treated as though somehow I'm, dishonestly trying to take money out of the system.
Sure. Sure.
Just wasn't able to work.
Sure.
Full stop.
Of course. And I mean, that's a real life situation.
Yes, it is.
That's a real life experience. And thousands of people like yourself across the country are in that same situation. And so we have to create these changes. But we can create the changes. That's the exciting thing. We as a people working together with a more conscious focus of what do we want? What do we want? So rather than just complaining about what we don't like, we have to come together to talk about the changes that we want to see and to have and live and experience.
Together, that's a very important word,
Yes.
and it's not something we're very good at in Ireland.
No.
I'm a very good complainer. I'm not a very good demonstrator or together person.
Sure.
So it is about changing
Yes.
my own attitude.
Well, Yes, but that takes confidence.
Yes, it does.
So it takes conversations like this
Yes, it does.
to name it.
Yes.
We are naming these issues today in real terms.
Yes.
And we're not talking about some high-powered policy making. We're talking about real life experiences and issues that impact on the everyday lives of people, like yourself with that experience you've shared, Richard,
Yes.
so courageously, and thank you for that. And also just the very everyday situations that people are finding themselves in, where there's young children going to school every day without food. There's families sitting in the dark because their electricity has been cut off. There's families coming into the winter again who will sit with blankets and coats on them because they can't afford heating. Now they're real issues. And they're huge issues of concern. And they have to be heard.
And our political system has become dehumanized because it's not connected to the people and it's not listening to the people.
So sadly, yes.
It's number crunching to balance the books.
That's right. Absolutely. And I suppose until we have it's looking at a bottom line.
Yes.
In the very sort of inhumane way of looking at it. That as long as we get X amount in. Now of course we all know that we need money.
Yes.
To survive and to run an economy.
Yes.
And people are not stupid. People know that. But there's ways of doing that in a more humane, compassionate way,
Yes.
in a way that works with people to ensure that empowerment. We know austerity doesn't work. It hasn't worked, it never works. It has never worked in past recessions. We have to be developing the economy rather than taking from it. We have to be giving into the economy rather than taking out of the economy.
On that point, Bernadette, schemes, work schemes,
Yes.
I mean, that's not contributing to the economy.
Well, that's an interesting one because I suppose it's a very, easy way to play around with live register figures.
That's what it is.
And live register figures that we have now X amount in employment. But is it real employment? What kind of employment is it? It's very much like the 0-hour contracts. Is that real employment?
Yes.
And so schemes are like that. And it will be very interesting, and I suppose I would ask the question, that, that a research is done into how many people have actually got actual real jobs from those schemes.
Yes.
Over the last number of years.
Yes.
Now that would be very interesting research, and it would be very, very interesting findings.
And there's been quite a large increase, with JobBridge and with TUS schemes. I think over the last 12 months it's seen a huge jump in
Yes.
I would say, inverted commas, participants.
Absolutely, for want of a better word. For want of a better word.
I was one.
Okay, for want of a better word. So, I mean, that is something that needs to happen.
Right.
Real research on the ground as into the viability of these
Right.
things, and how sort of that has, at the end of the day, meant that somebody now has a real job that's going forward. Richard, I just want to thank you for being here with me today, and for this interview, for this conversation and discussion, and for having the courage to sort of name the issues, that are so many people around the country are actually experiencing. So I really want to thank you for that, and for coming from such a heart place and an open and honest place about that, because so many people are experiencing these things and they're living lives of quiet desperation. So the moment that we begin to name it and open it up, people perhaps will say, do you know something, I have the confidence to talk about that too. Me too. That's my life and that's my experience. So, and if people want, to talk further with me about this, they can get in touch with me at www.newinsightsforchange.com. Let's continue the conversation. Thank you.